Okay, so thanks everybody for joining. This is our last session for the day, but a very important one on AOSP and App Framework fragmentation. And we don't like that word, it's the other F word, if you will. And so fragmentation is not a good word in Covisa, and that's part of the reason why we're here, is to bring organizations together and have those discussions that keep fragmentation at bay. So. With that, we got a great panel and a great moderator who is going to bring up some slides, right?
Yep.
And so hopefully we've solved, or in the process of solving, the heat problem that those of you who were in the last session felt, and my apologies for that. We'll get that fixed. And so, Andrew, you ready?
Yeah, hopefully. I think my laptop died, so I may have to wait till it charges to bring these up.
Okay.
All right. But I think, though, the important thing today is that, obviously we're going, this is based off of the AOSP App Framework Fragment group, which hopefully, I don't know, some of you were maybe here this morning when we went through a couple of the sessions. I know there was a keynote speaker going on at the same time. Dan was over there. But if you did not, which I was trying to bring up the slide here, what the group is about. And so really, AOSP app fragmentation, the core point here is that, as you may or may not know, is we've got sort of two paths that people are doing right now. We've got gas and non-gas. Could be both, could be one or the other, right? The biggest thing, though, within the way that automakers are bringing apps to vehicles, Android apps, is through each of these methods. So by utilizing gas, obviously, you get the obvious benefits of bringing the gas apps in there. But the thing we want to focus on is if you don't use that, obviously there are gaps that exist that we need to help solve. And my slides had a couple on there that I'll try to bring up. And so what we want to do today is talk a little bit about what those gaps are, but what I don't want to do today is necessarily solve those problems. Right, because we are just a new-ish group, right? Since April is when the first time it's happened. We wanted to inform everyone of what we're doing. We've got some great people involved with this now from the industry, from OEMs, from third-party app providers. And we're trying to draw more people into this because the more people we can get involved on it, we realize it's an important topic, the more we can try to solve on it, right? So I'd like to thank everyone here for joining the panel. I would like to let everyone introduce themselves because it's a fantastic panel of people. It's one of the, I think, hottest group that we have up here today. Best panel, hottest panel, right? I think everyone agrees, right? Amazing. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves there, and then we'll sort of jump into some of these topics we can talk about. Go ahead, Amit.
Okay, Amit Mehta. I'm the head of features on demand with Stellantis, and prior to that, since 2007, in fact, just about when iOS came up with JavaScript API, I've been developing apps. So looking forward to discussion. We've had some really interesting pre-conversations.
Hi, everybody. Vamsi Putrevu, CTO, co-founder of Mavi.io. So we do in-car commerce, so enable QSRs, parking, charging, and different experiences at those intersections. Yeah, super excited to be on this panel and chatting with all of you.
Okay, then I'll go next. Florian Delabre from Munich, Germany, BMW Group. So I'm the head of in-car store apps and in-car payment. So essentially, I'm making sure with my team that basically a customer can upgrade its car with new features, new digital possibilities, but also new services that you can purchase afterwards to make sure that the car is always up to date. Before that, I've been for quite a while also in the engineering department that is developing apps by themselves. So therefore, I am well aware of the issues that we had in the past and that we should avoid now in the future, and that's why I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, Mike Wahlstrom from GM. Also excited to be part of, I guess, the hottest panel, which I assume is a joke about the temperature of the room.
It's a little warm in here.
Not the quality of the panel, but anyway. Yeah, so at GM, I lead our engineering team that develops and integrates our connected products as well as our partner and third-party applications from a software and digital perspective. So glad to be here.
Awesome, thank you. I got my slides up, so AV team, if you guys could turn on the projector again, just so I can talk a little bit on it. So we've got, big thing here, we've got OEM, 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 and then Vamsi. right? Right? So one of the key points as we were talking about prepping for this is essentially, oh, it's not? Try it now. One more time. There we go. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to chat on this a little bit. You guys can take a look as the excerpt group focus, so kind of pulled out for what we're talking about. So this is what I paraphrased earlier for what we were doing. But again, the important thing of this is OEMs are involved in this heavily. We've got a lot of other people involved in the group. But one of the topics I want to start off with right now, or I want to talk with Vamsi about the third-party developer coming into this, right? One of the things I've seen, I think everyone who's involved in something like this is as you talk to Android developers coming in from mobile world, coming into the vehicle world, there are differences, right? And they're trying to find how we can bring the two together, and groups like this are really a very good way to bring them together. And bringing that perspective in, Vamsi, I wanted to start with you from the 3P perspective. What have you seen so far as the toughest parts about 3Ps entering automotive? You know, coming from mobile, I think they come and expect, well, it's just going to be the same, and I can just carry everything over. What are these things that you see that are troubling to you that could also be as advice to 3Ps trying to enter automotive market and trying to understand it better?
Sure, thanks for that. So as a third-party app developer, we've been working with tier ones, we've been working directly with OEMs, we've been working with the whole ecosystem. One thing, as the topic alludes to, is the fragmentation. I'll tell you, just from Mavi's standpoint, we rely a lot on navigation, we rely a lot on voice, we rely a lot on payments. So we rely a lot on these experiences being seamless for the driver. That's the important thing. It is one thing to be an app in an app store, but if you truly want to be integrated and provide value to the driver and make it seamless, you need to be able to connect the dots on where the driver is and what they intend to do. And that's what's missing right now. Yes, there is a navigation component. Yes, there is a voice component. Yes, there are thoughts and frameworks around payments and other things. But as an app developer, for me to go into that ecosystem and say, how do I really connect the dots? There is no overarching framework or thoughts in that respect. And it's great what work Covisa is doing here.
Awesome. So payments was brought up, right? I think that's a big one, and maybe to open it up to the rest of the OEMs here. What is it, the framework of payments now? What is it so difficult than identifying from a mobile sense where you just got a single person with a single phone maybe, and then into a vehicle where you have maybe different types of purchases or different ways of purchasing, things like that? What is it specifically about payments, that you've seen the gaps on? And this is kind of open. Vamsi, you can start on it, and then, feel free if we want to run down the line, Amit or anyone else want to jump in on it.
You want to take it?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So from a payment standpoint, one of the most important things as a service app provider that we see is reduction of friction, right? So we don't want the user to go and create a new account, add their card again. It's easy to provide that capability. No one's going to use it after that, right? But then that goes into super important topics: who owns the data, who owns the customer, the whole daisy chain, right? And that's where I'd love to hear the opinions of the OEMs.
I mean, I'm happy to take that one.
Go right ahead.
Essentially, like you said, there is a big difference between gas and non-gas. So for example, if you're building a gas app today, you already have some payment modules. Google is providing, for example, Google Pay, which you can use. But if you're providing a non-gas vehicle, there is nothing to bring payment there. So essentially, today we're facing a situation in which we as OEMs, so talking about the OEM perspective, we need to start getting attractive. We know how to build sexy cars. We've done that for quite ages. But today we don't know how to be attractive to third-party developers, like Vamsi said. Third-party developers are interested in seeing how they can monetize, for example. If there is no way to monetize today because there is no payment standardization there, it's going to be hard to attract those third parties to the automotive world. And therefore, that is also one of the important parts that need to be tackled. Because in the end, what we want to avoid, and that's the topic of the panel here, We don't want BMW to build a payment system and Mercedes building a different payment system and General Motors also another one. We want to build something across the industry, which we're trying to do here within Cuvesa, to make sure that essentially a third-party app developer that wants to embrace automotive doesn't have to care whether it's for BMW, GM, or some other automaker, but that there is some standard to build upon.
Maybe let me jump in here as well as the flip side of that as the gas representative OEM here, because we still have even the ability to use, of course, the Google side of payments. We still have the same issue, which is some third-party app providers want to work with us directly and not go through the Play Store, not go through Google, or we want to do our own stuff internally. And so we have the same thing, and it actually complicates things even further, where we want to, some providers do go through Google, some we want to go directly with the provider itself, and so we end up with effectively two separate payment authorization systems in one vehicle, and it's ultra confusing for a consumer, right? So it's super important for us to get to something like a standardized payment system like this, so that we can cut through that and make it more simplified for a customer, so regardless of whether you're gas or not.
Yeah, so just to kind of add to that, two things. One is I'm going to plug in the workshop tomorrow, where I think vehicle as a wallet. And the background of this is, and this is a theme that we're going to probably hear in terms of this fragmentation, and OEMs are getting into areas that we didn't necessarily always played strong in. So why is payment important? If you link it, is in a long time, first time, OEMs now have ambitions of software-driven revenues in the billions, right? So you draw the straight line from that ambition into what do I need to do? Payments become, earlier in a discussion, somebody used the word existential, foundational. And with that then comes in the concept of, do I behave as a merchant of record? Do I create an ecosystem? Do I use my vehicle as a trigger for payment? Do I use my vehicle as wallet? There's a lots of, we could talk for hours. I mean, we've had so far 3 or 4 different sessions of hour long on just how to talk about it, right? So in terms of kind of linking it back to the fragmentation question, and Mike mentioned it, OEMs always kind of try to look at it standardization and then differentiation, or having a unique relationship with the customer. And balancing that is where cross-industry groups like Cuvesa can come in, because either we all figure out what is unique about automotive in-vehicle commerce and only solve those parts, or we are going to lose the customer ultimately to consumer-grade platforms like Google Pay, like Apple Pay. And if customers want to go there and that is all that they require, then fine. Ultimately, we are in the business of serving the customer. But in-vehicle commerce does bring in its own specific problem statements. Combine that with our own needs of raising the revenues by the billions, which are software-driven. So I think I would put a full stop to that in terms of when we talk about payments as one of the aspects of in-vehicle commerce and fragmentation. Those are the aspects that we have to figure out what areas do we need to work together on, while keeping a space for each of the OEMs and service providers to kind of do their thing and possibly provide value-added services.
I'd like to add something to that, if I
For sure.
Andrew,
Go ahead.
Want to keep moving here, but Amit, you mentioned providing differentiation and standardization at the same time, and this is super important. As we all want to provide all these products for our customers, and none of us as OEMs can do it alone, of course, right? And so that's why this is super, super important for us to do a standardization like this, because none of us can, the wealth of products that we want to offer our customers, none of us think that we can go develop an engineering team that can redo what every third party out there is doing. So that's one. On top of that, and I think Vamsi, you mentioned this at the start, if all of those third parties, let's say we do enable all of those third parties to actually go develop, unique products for vehicles, and we don't work on an integration mechanism. Like we're talking about commerce here, but all of the, you brought up navigation and all these other things and cross-product integrations. Different than the phone, like a third-party product provider for a phone, you can kind of develop in a silo. You can deploy to that ecosystem, and you can actually gather more attention from a customer on a phone, and the customer will actually spend more time on a phone than they used to. In a vehicle, we don't have that luxury. A customer spends a finite amount of time in their vehicle, and a smaller amount of that time paying attention to their infotainment system. That's kind of a set amount of time. And so without the integrations, the cross-product integrations, then what ends up happening is we can provide all these products, and customers won't use them. So it's very important for us to get these standardizations and these cross-product integrations. Those are so important for us, so that customers actually will use the products that we're providing. Otherwise, all of this digital product stuff that we're all working on here is going to go to waste. So that's why this is super important. I think Vamsi and Amit both brought it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just going to add real quick to that, and I'll let you go, Amit. I think that's something very important that also third-party app providers need to understand, is that when we have our phones, everyone's staring at your phone all the time. You have full attention to your phone most of the time. When you're driving, you're driving. You're not necessarily full attention on that, right? And it's been along for the industry too for a long time. But they used to say the 30-day rule, right? Mm-hmm. Once you drive it off the lot, after 30 days, if they don't use it, you might never use it again. So we invest all this time and money into it, where we have the potential of things getting just buried, of all this work that everyone's doing, and then it disappears and never gets used. Amit, you were going to add something to that?
No, I was just going to remind everyone that tomorrow I think that session is quite interesting because it's a work group. And I myself am very much looking forward to hearing from everyone's experience in terms of payments, because to kind of, this is a topic that is very, very important. I mean, the reason we are trying to build digital arms outside of the customer-oriented aspect is there is revenue ambition. And I think the sooner we start to charge and we start to figure out what does customer want. Right now, I think there's a lot of throwing darts at the board going on, right? We think people will pay for heated seats, and we find out maybe not. We think they will pay for this or that, right? I think whether it's ADAS scenarios, range extenders, or simple things like media applications, all of it in the end, I think is based on ease with which you are able to perform the transaction to a point where, like that is what we learn from consumer platforms, that the payment is invisible. And I think right now it's very much visible, very much on top of everyone's mind. So in a way, the success here would be we forget about it, right? And that is where I think this group can help to figure out how we get there.
Awesome. Anything else on payments? I know we've got a lot of hot topics, but no? Yeah. I do want to remind everyone again that, we are looking for the gaps here, right? Like there are some things that come down already through AOSP that are totally fine for anyone who's using a white label app store, right? So we're looking for the gaps here, and that's what we're focusing on. God, I could keep going on payments, but let me switch it here. Let me try this one. There's the other thing I was going to bring up too about drivers and the age of drivers and what are okay. Is everyone going to continue to purchase regardless of the age group? Do we see anything where we have a group of a generation now who's used to everything in subscription base, right? They don't go to Blockbuster anymore, right? They everything's on subscription base and everything. It was just my thought of seeing you talk about payments in systems, but are we seeing, just one topic I want to bring up is are we seeing people making more purchases in vehicles? Does an age group matter? Are younger people making more purchases that you guys are seeing, and what you guys have in the vehicles today, or is it still TBD?
Maybe I can throw some light on that. So one of the stores that we've been talking to, Panera, right? You guys know Panera. their recent rollout of, how many of you have used the CarPlay Panera app? CarPlay? None of you? I know Craig has. One. All right. So even in this room, there is only one person who's used it. So think about it. Panera actually put out this, this is publicly available. They launched a CarPlay app along with two other providers, Domino's and I think Dunkin'. Quote unquote, wildly successful, right? And they're basically saying, based on the data that they're seeing, the engagement that they're seeing, people have stopped at least using their phones and they're using what is available. And the only thing you can do, by the way, in the Panera app and CarPlay, you need to set up your payments before in the phone. You can only reorder. That's it. You got to find the app, reorder. And they are seeing that sales that have generated in car have skyrocketed. So that's just giving one sample data point for us. I mean, I don't have specifics on subscription versus, just-in-time payments and things like that. But the fact that the modality change is causing people to actually change their behaviors and not use the app, and they are engaging with these, is, I think, proof enough for us all to invest in this direction.
Got it.
I'll add a data point. So back in March, this was one of the early experiments we ran after we put in the platform in one of the European vehicle lines. And this is a vehicle line that's been on the road for close to 6 years. So I was able to go in and put in something that, we call it refresh. It's a simple reminder that, hey, you have a connected service and it's expired, would you like to renew it? And, we were doing it outside of the vehicle through many marketing channels. All we did here is give them a QR code and allowed them to basically renew it by scanning the QR code using, wasn't my first choice to go to market like this, but that's what we could take to market in a 6-year-old vehicle. And we saw immediate jump of about 9%. So 9% of the people that otherwise would not have renewed, suddenly they're renewing it. This is converting actual, customers that had previously bought and did not renew, right? So this was, by the way, a service that I was somewhat surprised by that. That made me a believer. So I do think that if we bring down the friction and provide the point of sale services the same way, so many times I remember going to Amazon Prime and buying a movie that otherwise was actually free on Netflix.
Yeah.
It happened to me once or
Yeah.
twice because it was just so easy. So that's kind of my data point. That anecdotally speaking, I think people will buy if you build it.
Less friction. Got it. Anyone else? No? You don't have to.
I mean, maybe not a data point, but I think people will always be willing to pay for stuff if it's relevant for them. And what we need to do, and what is a part of this group, is basically to open up the possibilities. So we called it avoid fragmentation, but essentially what we want to do is open up possibilities, because we have ideas, but we might not have the best ideas for new features or whatsoever. I guess we do, but maybe not all of them. And like you said, Mike, today your time is limited on the infotainment system. And maybe watching Netflix for 5 minutes is not what you want to do. I don't know. But probably there are app developers out there that will find the next killer feature and that would want to do it for automotive, but they need to have an attractive platform. We need to open up the possibilities. And to be attractive, we also need to have some kind of reach. I mean, just looking at the numbers, the mobile phone market is more than 1 billion phones being sold every year. The car market, if we put all of us together, it's like close to 70 million cars. So essentially, just like we in the automotive industry are looking into our resources, also third-party app developers are looking where to invest. And therefore, if we're working together on some kind of standardization to make sure that interfaces are the same across all OEMs embracing the AOSP world, that makes basically the reach much wider there.
Great points. Thank you. All right, let me pivot here. I'm going to pivot hard. Oh, question? Roger, question?
Yeah, I'm curious. I would think that Google Assistant's going to play a big role. I think GM's going to have
there going to be, first of all, what do you feel about the role of the voice interface for this kind of an application? And is there going to be a battle between Alexa and Google Assistant in the car? Are they both going to be there, or what's the deal?
So I think so first of all, voice, I'll say voice, the way voice is right now is scratching the surface of what it needs to be. And I'd say the same thing to Patrick Brady at Google. So, but it needs to be more of a.
Sound is working pretty well in my Hyundai.
If you want to get in a GM car later, let me know. I hate calling the assistant's voice because if all you're doing is replacing a tap or a type with a voice, then you're not really doing much. And today, what we're doing with Google Assistant, it's an important step to do that, but it doesn't do enough to get to a point that we make it, pretty much everybody, as we've answered these questions today, has talked about friction, and that whether it's payment or whatever, right, like and attention. It's all about driving up usage, and how you drive up usage is you reduce friction of how to use that product. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity coming in this assistant space. And the way Google Assistant is right now is like a very, we're just scratching the surface of what it's going to look like in the next year or two here. What you'll see is it is like the center way that you interact with your vehicle, I think. So.
Maybe just adding to that one, because I think you're going to get a different answer from every OEM. So essentially,
but mine's right, so don't listen to Florian.
No, you might get Google Assistant in a GM car, you might get Alexa in a BMW car, and you might get something different in another car. And that is essentially also part of it. What we could touch also in the expert group here is to make sure that a third-party app that is building an application should not care about building it for Google Assistant or building it for Alexa.
Yep.
What they want
Exactly,
to do
that's
is
true.
essentially making sure that their app can be voice controlled in a GM or in a BMW, and therefore we need to make sure that we work together on the right interfaces to make it available for those third parties.
So I'll just add one more point, because this is very interesting when we're touching some real live wires here. So when it comes to voice though, right, here's my worry. Mike is exactly on the spot when he's saying this is the interface of the future, right? But we've been here before with Bluetooth. Mm-hmm. And what Google and Apple did is they took the two core functions. I need to charge my phone, I need to connect the Bluetooth, converted that into a beachhead technology to take over display. And now we are struggling to get out of that. I fear that's the future with voice. Because if it is truly all that we think it is, it's going to take over. I mean, both Google Assistant and Alexa basically have what they call intent takeover mechanism. Meaning, if I want to just get the speech to text today, they will maybe negotiate it because they still are not dominant. But at some point, they say no, right? So now, this is the analogy I've given internally, which is they don't want to anymore sell me the ice cream. They want to sell me the ice cream and the fudge topping and the sprinkles and charge me triple for it. Right? So I see the nodding of the heads, because in the executive rooms, I think there is not a whole lot of realization right now that what we decide, and again, to connect it back to the cohesive and fragmentation, is it's not us versus them. Everybody's ultimately, I think, is trying to do the best thing they think for their company and their customer, right? And customers ultimately people will vote with their feet and their voice in this case. But to kind of point out this, right, this is what really worries me in a way, that OEMs are playing cricket and some of the tech companies are playing baseball. And we don't know whether we are on a baseball ground or cricket ground.
Yep.
I have no idea how to play cricket.
We can teach you. It's okay. God, we could extend this session for
Yeah,
another
this-
hour probably, right? Yeah, do you have a quick question real quick?
Yeah, so I have two questions. I'll just touch upon this voice assistant. I think one of the important thing to one of the important thing to note is what is the accuracy of voice assistant technology with Google as well as Alexa. And when I asked this question to Amazon, they didn't really have a data because it's probably too early stage. So that's an important thing because I think what you touched upon, Amit, is the user adoption. It has to be frictionless, and the accuracy is very important. The second thing is we're talking about Android Automotive and also the Google Assistant services. And one of the key factor in getting the high user adoption is integrating all of these e-commerce services into the navigation map in a way that's seamless, frictionless, and going to augment the adoption rate for the vehicle-based subscriptions and transactions. And when we are adopting this Android Automotive Operating Systems and Google Automotive Services, we have to take into account whether we can customize these navigation services in a way that it will help the adoption. So any thoughts around that?
So I have some numbers I know from the user clinics, and I think people who are in that business can talk more. But I don't know if necessarily people have done comparison of automotive Google Assistants versus automotive Alexa, but Alexa versus Google Assistants versus Siri, it's pretty public knowledge. And depending on the region, actually, Alexa comes out ahead of Google. In general, in North America, Alexa is ahead. It doesn't cover many of the languages. In Europe, it's one of the lowest coverage, in fact, in terms of regional languages. So that's the answer for the first question. When I think in automotive, we are still kind of recovering from the earlier attempts of going with the embedded nav and embedded VR, which sucked. I mean, there is no, and it's created that such a tailwind of, it's such a big, perception problem that even though lately the native VR is really good, I can tell you as both like ex-GM and now Stellantis, people have poured their heart and soul in it. It works. Nobody wants to try it. So that's the answer on that. I think your second question related to nav being the gateway for all of the services, that's to be seen. I guess it makes logical sense, but then TomTom or Telenet, they would have run the world, right? I don't know if that's the case, though. I think that's more of a user experience problem. I'm not qualified to answer. Maybe somebody can. As to what is the gateway drug for consumers to consume the most information?
Yeah, intuitively people are using navigation, and this is more so in Europe, that Europeans actually have higher usage rate for inbuilt navigation. US, I think people tend to use their phones for navigation more. But I think when we're talking about these e-commerce services, they need to be integrated in a way into this navigation such that it helps adoption rate and not necessarily be.
So data I've seen is the top 3 use cases remain to be nav, audio, and Bluetooth. Nav, Bluetooth, and audio in that order, right? So I agree that nav is used by pretty much every one of us as soon as we go in. But that's a user experience problem more than necessarily saying there are use cases where you could embed nav in such a fashion that it's serving the need, but at the same time you have other real estate available, whether on cluster, HUD, where you can start monetizing those places. I don't think right now I have seen the data that conclusively says that I must go through nav screen, but I'm also admitting that I may be out of loop on that. I think it requires some specific decision.
Yeah, I could probably talk about this for another hour, but
Yeah.
So I'll give my opinion on a couple of things. First of all, on the voice, when we talk about accuracy of voice, it's an important KPI, but I almost care less about it. Because at this point, speech to text, text to speech, that kind of speech engine stuff is almost a commodity. And what's more important is actually the understanding than it is the actual recognition. And so what we're going to see, the context build that we're going to have here coming out soon is going to be so important. That's going to be way more of a focus than the accuracy of any speech to text. So it's an important metric, but I wouldn't overtrain on it that much, to be, in my opinion. As far as nav is concerned, nav is just a price of entry at this point. Having a killer nav function is just a price of entry for any OEM to have. I hit every time I get in my truck, I hit my destination, right? Every single time, everywhere I go. I literally ran down the street to Walgreens to get some mints like an hour and a half ago or something like that, and I hit nav, and then I hit nav to come back, right? It's literally right down the street, right back on the street. I hit it every single time I get in my car. It's not about the nav. It's about the integration with your life. It's about knowing if it's open. Mm-hmm. It's about knowing the time it's open, if it's busy, if there's traffic. It's about that side of things. It's not about the actual navigation. And so it's all about like the kind of integration with your life. And so what you're going to find here shortly is all of this comes together. The assistant, the nav, and everything isn't distinct products anymore. Those are no longer going to be distinct products. Those are all going to be integrated, and it kind of wraps back to what Vamsi was saying at the start.
Just one more point to add in terms of the group and what it can contribute is we don't have to get too fancy with voice either, right? Just let's look at a taxonomy of intents defined by, say, a Covisa or whoever, right? Let's just define those intents. Behind that, third-party providers, I'm sure you heard this a ton of times, we've got Gen AI solutions that we can build capabilities on top of. We don't even care about understanding from the voice assistants, right? I've got troves of data that can support any kind of an intent, and we know the context of where the driver is. We know exactly the inventory. If you're going to Walgreens, I would have known if mints are available, and I would have rerouted you to a
Are they good or not?
7-Eleven, right?
How many stars?
That's what we're here to do. So my point is, keep it simple, baby steps. Even if we define simple voice intents from an OEM standpoint and a standardization standpoint, apps and capabilities are there to leverage so much more that's available outside of the car today.
Yeah, those integration intents and that kind of thing is what's going to, the OEM that provides more of those integration points is going to attract more and more third parties. And so as we do that and standardize more and more and more of them, then what you see is more and more of that becomes kind of a commodity, and the differentiation always builds on top of that. This is the same thing that happened in the phone industry. But
Yep. Great. So we're almost at time, but we started late. So if you guys are cool for a couple more minutes, I only have maybe one more question that will probably lead to 30 more questions, and then we'll maybe open up to a couple Q&As. We've been talking about voice, but one of the things, big, small, vertical, horizontal, pillar to pillar, right? Displays everywhere. Sometimes between OEMs, displays are a fraction of an inch difference, right? So one of the things the group was looking at, of course, is displays and how they impact. So maybe, again, we'll start with Vamsi from the beginning, from an app developer standpoint, coming from mobile, where, okay, yeah, there are variances, but it's nothing, right, like what we have in automotive. So what are the differences that you're seeing, that how you have to interact with OEMs now, and where the group could focus on figuring out, okay, this is how we deal with all these different screen sizes inside the vehicle?
So obviously from an automotive standpoint, Android Automotive and others, you've got one end of the spectrum where you have super defined templates, right? So you confirm to these templates, some implementation or some tier one is taking those templates and saying, I will then do the fan out to make sure it conforms to all of the screens and standards. But that's just super restrictive. I mean, we are held captive to someone like a Google that's saying, oh, I've not thought about e-commerce, so you guys cannot do e-commerce, right? I've not thought about certain capabilities. So it's very restrictive. On the other side, I feel like there are emulators out there that are doing a decent job, but Still, app providers need to go make sure tomorrow if there is a different screen size, there is nothing out there that will say the fan out is taken care of, right? There are no standards out there. So there is definitely a lot of work that the app providers have to do today compared to, say, the mobile app space.
How about on the OE side? What's your thoughts?
I mean, maybe I can add to it. I think you forgot one important format. We just launched a Mini with a round display, which makes it even easier now. Now you don't even need to do square, you need to do round, so it's even more complicated.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
I'm glad it's not just us.
Yeah. So basically, I think the app developers should not care about the format of the display, whether it's rectangular, whether it's vertical, whatsoever. We need to make sure that it's scalable. So the third-party app developer needs to make sure that it's scalable. And also what the group's currently looking into is also bringing in some emulator that covers all of the OEMs that are part of Covesa right now, of the expert group, to make sure that they can test their third-party app on a generic emulator, but also being able to loop in the hardware profiles of the different OEMs to see how it behaves in different screen sizes. So that is something that is being tackled by the group as of right now. And sure, if we're doing things in a round-shaped display, like you seem to be doing as well, that is also something where we as an OEM need to use the same interfaces and to make sure that it adapts on the screen like it should.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think there's a. So we're not doing round, but we're doing weird shapes. But on the engineering side, obviously, it frustrates us because we want everything square to be easy. But yeah, I think we're not. The vision that you're talking about, Florian, is a great vision. But right now, we're just not quite there, right? Like at least we're not, and it still takes some brute force to kind of get there. So it's a bit frustrating right now. Working with the design teams on that.
Yeah. Amit, anything on that?
No, I think they covered it. The problem with the display is same with many others, that we can standardize it, but we will lower the fidelity.
Yep.
Right. You have to then kind of go to the lowest common denominator. I've seen those type of solutions, whether it's cross-platform or web. Right. I worked on web. Nothing beats like a real custom display that is, because it's a very limited real estate. Right, and you want to use every single pixel for the giving the best possible experience. So it's a problem, I think, more of what do we want to do? Do we want to cater to the lowest common denominator for the lack of fragmentation, or do we want to go for the
right?
Because the person who bought the one car, for him, it's the one car. They don't care if you make 17 types, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's, to me, I think it's like they covered it, and that's the. I think Mike said it, like every OEM is probably thinking the same. That
Yeah, and I think we've sort of hit it here is like, you know, we were saying we need to make it easier for the third-party developers, so then that way, when we've talked about earlier about differentiation, right? So then that way, getting this so that way your weird-looking displays, even though they look beautiful in the car, will somehow work with the 3P developers, and we can make it a lot easier for that.
Right.
So.
And of course, there is a role for tier ones and other players in here. So obviously, we are working with yourself, Harman, all of these players who are helping bridge those gaps. But to Amit's point earlier, nothing beats native.
Yep.
We all know that, but it's a spectrum.
Yep. Okay. 5 minutes left. I popped this up because as we were talking about AOSP emulator, I'm not going to go over this. I just wanted to point it out because if you guys check on the wiki page for the group, this is on there in the charter. You can see more of the things we've identified so far, and that's why I say so far. This is just a snapshot, right? There's a lot more, and there's a lot more we're going to address. Got 4 minutes here. I'll say any questions from anyone in the audience left.
Yeah, a question about, I think just recalling back to the navigation question and third-party applications, that being an important service. So I guess one way to think about that might be bring content into the navigation application. The other way might be expose some of the information to third-party applications. I'm curious what the OEMs think about the sensitive, well, I mean, there's obviously the privacy issue, but more of maybe the monetary value of some of that data, and whether at this point, OEMs are willing to give some of that up in order to make developers successful.
So before anyone answers, we talked about data originally as a topic for this, but then we realized it would take like 4 hours. So we'll see how contained they can keep it.
Yeah, this is a really tough one to answer. in what is probably now 3 minutes, especially given the sensitivities around, of course, all the nav suppliers and what data they're sharing and not sharing with OEMs as well. But what I would say is data sharing is obviously I'll say two things. One, data sharing is a really important piece of all of this, right? Both with app providers and OEMs, the data sharing back and forth is going to be a major part of this. So I'll say that. And then the second thing is part of that being just standardized open APIs is going to be how we handle that. I think is how we have to manage it and we're just going to have to agree on it that's really part of the whole open standardization. Otherwise we'll never get there. We can't do one by one like negotiations with every app provider and every navigation provider and that kind of thing. So, how's that a plug for your group?
Exactly. Thanks. Well,
Right. Just one more point to add on to that. I come from just worked at Applebee's, a bunch of ad tech. The ad tech ecosystem has solved it to an extent of looking at who's the data custodian, who's the owner, who's actually the data transferring to, what's the value chain, sort of what we call as attribution over there, right? So there are frameworks available out there that you can leverage, but of course in this space and this world we've not dug into it. So another thing that we could explore as a part of Covisa.
yeah, and that's what we talked about before. Is we were hoping that this would help advance the group, but at the same time we were fearful that it may spawn other groups that need to be developed for this, which could happen. But it's huge topics.
Yeah, it is.
Amit, anything else?
No, I was saying you got it. I
Yeah.
think the only one question I can ask succinctly and concisely is, you asked whether it has value. Yes, it's gold mine.
Yep.
But more apt analogy is more like it's an oil on a land that's revered by so many. So while you can go mining, you're gonna upset a lot of folks, including ones who own that, right? So I think there is a privacy and policy management. So like me as a consumer, I hate this conversation because I start with the thing like, it's not yours. Where I go is my data, right? I want to be in control. So I think it's one of those things where technology has to catch up with ambitions of everyone. I think I've seen some solutions where just like health record, people are saying, hey, we can make the consumer be in control of what data points they give, and I don't think anybody's implemented seriously anything.
Yeah, I think the Android permissions framework is pretty good, right? I think, and it works in mobile, and it should carry. Like, I would love to have the Mavi app know where I'm going, just like we're talking about the 7-Eleven scenario, and it's.
No, believe me, I was with you guys when we did the permissions nightmare. So no, but we can debate some of the
All right. I don't want to keep you guys from the other session there. Any parting thoughts, advice, recipes that you guys wish to share with the group? No? That's okay. You
Very
guys
easy
said
advice.
a lot.
Join the expert group.
Exactly.
Like
that
we
was going to
said,
be my plug, right? Yeah.
What is really important to us is like having all parties joining there, not only OEMs, having third parties like Mavi, which we really appreciate, also joining, trying out some POCs and whatsoever, because it's the whole industry, but also wider than the industry, also store providers and third-party apps that need to give input, that need to give feedback as well, what works, what doesn't, what is needed, so that we know as an automotive industry how to open up new opportunities and what needs to be standardized there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And the last parting thought, please don't miss tomorrow's session, 4:45 for payments.
Exactly.
It's
Yep.
more detailed.
What time is that at? Do you know? What time
Four,
is it?
no, tomorrow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow at 4:40, same slot.
Same time? Okay.
I think so. 2:15? Sorry, please check.
Check the app.
Check the app.
Mike, were you going to say anything? No, you're good.
Yeah.
You said enough. That's fine. You guys did great. All right, awesome. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you over in the reception.